Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for my client Demi's vlog. And we did a long pause bench press today, which he said, yeah, that was incredibly hard. And the thing that we notice in general, just with this bar path, as I've said before, triceps, 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 right? This guy needs bigger arms, okay? A lanky lifter, he's well over 6 foot tall. We've got a lot of work to do to fill out his frame, but what you find with longer arm lifters is that they're more likely, in my experience, to have a tricep weakness. Far more likely to have a tricep weakness because oftentimes they're forced to grip the bar narrower relative to their clavicle than of other people. They have a longer distance to travel, so they tend to run out of steam throughout the lift due to things like rate of force production, and then ultimately they just don't always have the triceps to lock it. Also in his case, we can see that visibly his arms relative to body weight and size are a little bit undersized. So, we can look at all these things. We can look at the bar path and say, okay, this guy needs a lot more triceps. So I've also got him started this week doing some band press downs and stuff also so that we can get his elbow tendons ready, because in order to really hammer the triceps, we need his elbows healthy. We need those tendons healthy. Otherwise, what happens when I put lifters on the tricep specialization program, frequently what happens is that they develop tendonitis. And this is something I figured out years ago. I really noticed this when I went coaching full time, as opposed to just a part-time endeavor where I just ran a few clients, a number of years ago. I started running into people who had these issues, guys who had a lot of chest. They were stuck in the high 200s or whatever on a bench, and we started hammering their triceps, and they started developing, elbow tendonitis problems very, very quickly, particularly if they had that history of weak triceps. So then we had to do all the band work, and then we did all the band work, and then the tricep movements, and all of a sudden they're benching 320, 325, 330. Guys who were stuck in that 275 range, just something around there. And I've had that happen a couple of times really early when I started coaching a lot of clients, like, in that around 15 to 20 plus clients full time. And so this is kind of what we see here. Also, I had him do a sumo deadlift this week. We did a sumo deadlift, and it was very difficult for him. He's a conventional puller. But again, sometimes we want to run that opposite stance, right? We need that opposite stance for a lot of people. Even though I personally don't do it, I ran a long phase of sumo dominance. And, granted, I have an elite conventional these days, but I did even a long phase of sumo. And I don't think it's a bad idea for anyone. Of course, a lot of my conjugate lifters, we rotate them, which is what I'm doing with him. There's a lot of base building work to do with this guy still. His squat and bench are relatively weak. He's got a good deadlift, got a real good deadlift, but he's built a deadlift. But, we just have to fill his frame out so much more. All right, and then we see for the other supplemental work, he's good at good morning. So if we were to narrow it down and say, well, what's he strong at? Conventional deadlifts, good mornings. And because he's so strong at good mornings, I venture to say his good mornings may be stronger than his back squatting. What does this tell us? Quads, stance, adductors. Okay? This is a guy who's got to have more adductor and quad. It's a guy who's got to learn to squat real wide because he's got all the hip hinge in the world. Now, granted, we are limited with the equipment he's got here, but we can make it work. We can do these lunges with a safety bar. In fact, we can add more volume to these over time, and I possibly will start adding more and more quad and adductor volume because he's got the strong posterior chain, right? Those sets of 10 are past, he's past 2 plates aside for those sets of 10. And for a guy who's pulling, mid 500s, again, I know he does kilos, he's not in America, but for most of my followers are in America. He's pulling around 240. We've maxed at 240 kilograms on the deadlift. Right? He's doing good mornings for sets of 10, multiple sets of 10, for full range of motion, 110 kg. Or it might be 115 at this point. So, his posterior chain is strong. So everything is limbs for him. Granted, he needs to get thicker all the way around, but we start looking at these weaknesses. What do we see? And well, we don't have a deadlift weakness because his deadlift is his dominant lift. Like I don't ever like to take someone who has one lift that is way better than their others and talk about weaknesses in it, especially when it's a squat versus a deadlift disparity. Because clearly the other lift is the weak link. But we look at squatting. What do we have? Well, he's fighting against his long legs. Fighting against those long femurs. So what does this tell us? And we can see it in his movements. We can see it in the ratios of his strength. His posterior chain's good. He can good morning for days. He can conventional deadlift way more than he squats. Okay. Quads and adductors. He's benching his triceps. Got a good deadlift. We know his back's not weak. You know, he's not going to have weak traps and stuff like that. Again, relative to everything. He's at a, pretty high body weight, long limbs. He can do chins. All right. I don't think we're weak there. Of course, here I've got him. You can see his front raises. He had been doing these with a really light weight, and he's like, I need to go heavier. I'm like, yeah, go heavier. Then he managed to get sets of 10. Like, don't shortchange yourself on this stuff. You didn't do some weight on these. And I'd like to get him over to JM presses soon, but I need to make sure his elbows can handle it. In the meantime, those floor skull crushers work real well. They work real well. But that was dynamic effort upper day. Dynamic effort lower, he is ordering a box. I'm really unhappy with the depth he gets on this bench. Now, notice he is much better here. We're seeing consistency with the head and torso position. So that's improved for him. Same thing, watch those sumo speed pulls. See that quad adductor weakness in this? He uses all ass and hamstrings. It's all posterior chain is what he's using. Okay? Because that's what's strong for him. You see it even coming over into his sumo pulls. So we've got a lot to fix with this guy, and we're going to fix it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.